climate change and land reform. Mr Day, please.
Thank you. First Minister, can I explore with you the extent to which the advice of the UK Climate Change Committee is sought and then followed by the Scottish Government in shaping climate change policy?
First Minister.
Well, the UK Committee on Climate Change is the statutory independent advisor to the Scottish Government. I think it was the 2009 Act of this Parliament that established it as such. So we're obliged to take into account the advice of the Committee on Climate Change, and we do that. It will not be the only factor we take into account when coming to decisions. Obviously, this is particularly pertinent and relevant just now as we come to what are not easy and actually finely balanced judgments about the extent to which we set targets in our next climate change bill. There's obviously, we consulted on a target, the 90% target that the UK Committee on Climate Change said was at the outside edge of what was achievable. We are being pressed, rightly and understandably, by many organisations to go for net zero, and net zero is our aspiration. What we are thinking about carefully just now, given that when you put something in legislation you have to have a path to deliver it, is the extent to which and the timescale in which that aspiration can be translated into legislation, given some of the unique nature of the legislation that we have in Scotland.
Anticipated where I was going with this, because obviously the climate bill will be coming to my committee, and I understand you won't want to reveal what's in the bill and the decision you've taken around the target, but I wonder if we could maybe explore a little further how the government is going to balance that expert opinion you've had, which, as you say, suggests that a 90% target is at the ambitious end of what's achievable, set against the understandable aspirations of the environmental lobby. How are you going to do that in practice?
Well, we're looking very carefully at that just now, because this is so if I can be very clear, my aspiration is the same as the environmental lobby. I want to see us get to a net zero position as quickly as possible, and some argue for that to be 2040, some 2050, some would argue probably earlier than 2040, but that's our position. The question is, because right now we could not credibly say we can set out a pathway from here to there. Now, those in the environmental lobby would say, yeah, but that shouldn't stop you because the science and the technology is changing, and I recognise that. I suppose the difficult thing comes when you're translating that aspiration into binding legislation. And there's 2 points that, because other countries, some other countries, Sweden, for example, are often held up as well. They've already committed to this. There's actually 2 points of difference between our legislation in Scotland and the approach taken by many other countries. There are very few countries that have binding statutory targets like we do, and there are fewer still that have binding annual targets. So our targets are actually very tough. We also only count domestic measures towards our targets. Other countries, often the ones that are cited, will use international credits. We don't do that. So we've got to, if we're going to put something in law that we are on an annual basis measured against, we have to be able to look people in the eye and say, well, how, we know how we can deliver that. So that's the process we're going through just now. Obviously, the bill will be published soon, before the summer recess, and it's not an easy judgment, but the difference here is not in aspiration. It's just about the extent to which and the timescale over which that aspiration can be converted into binding annual targets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Gordon Lyndhurst, Convener of Economy, Jobs